How Rubinstein Taught Me to Play by Josef Hofmann. This is a wonderful article written for the Ladies' Home Journal in January of 1907. I came across this article, and there are countless others as well, but this one in particular I wanted to share with you because it reads not like a list of how to practice piano problem X, Y, and Z, but it's more of a personal story, a glimpse into what his relationship with Anton Rubinstein was like as a student. And this article really pulled on my heartstrings. I had to, started tearing up, get the Kleenex out a few times even. This is a wonderful article. And so I'm going to read it for you. And then along the way, I'm going to offer some commentary about things that it reminds me of, because I studied with a musical grandchild, you might say, of Josef Hofmann, and that, of course, was the celebrated American pianist Constance Keene, who's up on my bookshelf behind me. I studied with her at Manhattan School of Music when I was doing my doctoral degree over 20 years ago now. And we were very close. We really got along. We're quite different, but got along surprisingly well. And many of you know that after my lessons with her, every single lesson, I took detailed notes. I have them here. And I wrote down everything I could think of, everything I could remember, her quotes, her anecdotes, stories she would tell, tips for the pieces I was working on. And then just general observations too, things she was wearing, maybe what she was cooking that day, little personal things. All of that to me is essential. I don't just want to know how to finger a passage or how to pedal at the piano. I want more than that, And when I come across articles that get at the personal side of a great artist and that offer analogies and associations that are non-musical even, that help me along my path, I light up like a slot machine. And that's what happened when I came across this article, How Rubinstein Taught Me to Play. Okay, so I'm going to read it for you by Josef Hofmann. Outside of the regular students of the Imperial Conservatory of Music at St. Petersburg, Rubinstein accepted but one pupil. The advantage and privilege to be that one pupil was mine. I came to Rubinstein when I was 16 years old and left him at 18. Since that time, I have studied only by myself, for to whom could I have gone after Rubinstein? And this reminds me of how while I was researching my teacher, Constance Keene, and she was married, by the way, to Abram Chasins, who was also her teacher. And Chasins has studied with Josef Hofmann, and they were quite close. That was a strong relationship. And the way Abram Chasins spoke about Josef Hofmann was like a hero status. And Abram Chasins, who was a wonderful writer, he wrote Speaking of Pianists, whose book I've been narrating on the channel. He did music programs for WQXR in New York many years ago. He died, I think, in 1987, born in 1903. He knew Gershwin, very well connected in the New York musical scene, and as I say, a student of Josef Hofmann. And it's just interesting to me because when Chasins would talk about his teacher, Hofmann, whose article I'm reading, Hofmann would tell him, oh, no, you were just like babies compared to, we all are just babies compared to what Anton Rubinstein was. And so the adoration, the idolization of the teacher in these two cases. And I feel that way about Constance Keene. Not all of us feel that way about every single teacher we've had. I don't have that same feeling for every teacher I've had, even though I've had very good teachers. But for Constance Keene, my heart, I'd do anything for her, even though she's no longer with us, So it's that's something that stands out to me here, this just incredible awe of the master pianist, your teacher. And he says, so he was the only student of Rubinstein. Since that time, I have studied only by myself, for to whom could I have gone after Rubinstein? His very manner of teaching was such that it would have made any other teacher appear to me like a schoolmaster. He chose, and I love this because this reminds me of Constance Keene, and it's a similar teaching tactic that has that kept its way through her, and I like to think that I try to do this in my own way. I'm not Josef Hofmann, my goodness, but this method of teaching, he says, Rubinstein chose the method of indirect instruction through suggestive comparisons. Theodore Leschetizky was another one. I mean, this is going way back. Obviously, I didn't know these people, but I read books written by their students, and they recount stories and anecdotes of these great teachers. And Leschetizky was another one. And he was friends, actually, Leschetizky, with Anton Rubinstein. They knew each other very well and admired each other. And Leschetizky was always full of just unusual ways of explaining things, and a little bit like a biting tongue kind of thing, and sarcasm, and just all sorts of non-musical associations. And he says here, he chose the method of indirect instruction through suggestive comparisons. He touched upon the strictly musical only upon rare occasions. In this way, he wished to awaken within me the concretely musical as a parallel of his generalizations, and thereby preserve my musical individuality. Individuality is very important to me at the piano. I want my playing to hopefully be like nothing that anyone has played in each respective piece. It doesn't mean I've listened to every recording, that's impossible, but I try to bring something of my own. And I'm also heavily influenced by Glenn Gould, whose playing was incredibly individual, whether you like it or not. And I'm sure he didn't mind that plenty of people don't like his playing, but he wanted to rile you. He wanted to get a reaction of some sort, the individuality. And Constance Keene, she tried to foster that, not tried, she did. She fostered that in her students very much so. And I can see it coming through in two generations before her here, or 3 generations rather. And it's fascinating to me to find some of these teaching trends within a musical family tree. And it reminds me too, in Josef Hofmann's book here, Piano Playing with Piano Questions Answered, he talks about, and I reference this to my students all the time, the 2 sides of piano playing, the technical side and the psychic side. And it's the psychic side where all the magic lays. And that is a very difficult side to teach, certainly because it depends on one's own experiences, right? So tapping into this, and I just get the sense that Rubinstein was really on that train. But here's something that's interesting. Rubinstein never played for me. He only talked. And I, understanding him, translated his meaning into music and musical utterances. Now, Rubinstein performed. He could play. It's not that he couldn't, but he just didn't. Sometimes, for instance, when I played the same phrase twice in succession and played it both times alike, say in a sequence, he would say, "In fine weather you may play it as you did, but when it rains, play it differently." This is starting to blush here. This is turning me on. It's like the past knocking on my soul's door. This is what I want to try to do in my own music, it's totally speaking to me. Rubinstein was much given to whims and moods. and he often grew enthusiastic about a certain conception only to prefer a different one the next day. Apparently it was not etched in stone or not set in his ways, and not telling students you must do it this way or that way. I have a feeling that Rubinstein, if he were doing YouTube videos, they probably wouldn't do very well, because he also was known for having a lot of wrong notes in the playing. But the individuality would have been so fascinating to not only to listen to, but to watch. And these associations of his in the lesson, and changing the concept of a piece on a whim, So many, when I go onto YouTube and piano tutorial, and it brings up things, and so many of the titles are related to, just making up an example, but the 3 pitfalls of great playing, or how to fix your piano playing in 3 easy steps. And I try to imagine, I don't know if you do this, but I try to imagine these old pianists like Rubinstein, what his face would look like if he were scrolling through YouTube now, all these 130 years after his death, and seeing that these titles that are doing well, these videos have tens of thousands of views. What would he think? I just feel like he would be kind of shocked. But who knows? That's just my thought. Yet he was always logical in his art. And though he aimed at hitting the nail from various points of view, I love that, various points of view, he always hit that nail on the head. And when I listen to pianists of this generation in the early recordings, as I say, the individuality stands out. Pianists today, I suppose, are much better technically speaking. They are, really, in general. Abram Chasins, my teacher's husband, wrote about this in his book, and that was in the mid-1950s, saying how the technical powerhouses, the players of today. But this other whims and moods and individuality and musical associations and imagination and some of these other things in this article, that's what I really miss. And that's why I keep knocking on the door of these old articles. They're wonderful. So he always hit the nail on the head, despite having different points of view. Thus, he never permitted me to bring to him as a lesson any composition more than once. He explained this to me once by saying that he might forget in the next lesson what he told me in the previous one, and by drawing an entirely new picture, only confuse my mind. Nor did he ever permit me to bring one of his own works, though he never explained to me his reason for this singular attitude. And Rubinstein was a great composer, as well as a great performer. Many of the great pianists in the 19th century were also fine pianists, also fine composers. Paderewski is a wonderful example, for sure. Although no other pianist also became Prime Minister of Poland, as Paderewski did. Usually, when I came to him, arriving from Berlin, where I lived, I found him seated at his writing desk, smoking Russian cigarettes. He lived at the Hotel de Europe. After a kindly salute, he would always ask me the same question, "Well, what is new in the world?" I remember playing, and this is the stuff I love, where it gets into the personal. It's like it's a narrative. The interactions of the teacher and the student at this time. It's not just jibber-jabber, nothingness, because they're great artists, There's like magic in there. It's like a flame is just the inspiration of it all, to me anyway. Probably think I'm nuts, but this is really turning me on. And I remember replying to him when he says, "What is new in the world?" He said, "I know nothing new. That's why I came to learn something new from you." Rubinstein, understanding at once the musical meaning of my words, smiled, and the lesson thus promised to be a fine one. I noticed he was usually not alone when I came. but had as visitors several elderly ladies, sometimes very old ladies, mostly Russian, and some young girls, seldom any men. There were always ladies coming to Leschetizky as well for lessons. I mean, men too. But there's it just reminds me of Leschetizky because I was reading, actually I narrated Ethel Newcomb's book about Leschetizky, and she was one of his students. These ladies that came in and had kind of foolish things to say, and they were dressed in black, and he called them crows, I think it was. I don't recall exactly, but it's just interesting stories about the people and descriptions almost. Like you can picture the room, right? With a wave of his hand, he directed me to the piano in the corner, a Bechstein, which was most of the time shockingly out of tune. But to this condition of his piano, he was always serenely indifferent. It sounds a little bit like he was kind of sloppy with some things. Like if we approach it from a modern standpoint, his piano was out of tune, he didn't demonstrate for the student, and he didn't want to hear the same piece twice because he would change his opinion. That kind of suggests haphazard. But when these rigorous artists who left recordings for us, Josef Hofmann, we hear their playing and we're blown away by the majesty, the wizardry, the magic of it all. And then they rave about these teachers. It's kind of, in a way, it doesn't fit. If we think logically, it doesn't fit. But then I think it's that psychic side of playing that is like kind of missing today. It's been perhaps missing for a while, but like they had it going on here. These two for sure. He would remain at his desk, studying the notes of the work while I played. He always compelled me to bring the pieces along, insisting that I should play everything just as it was written. He would follow every note of my playing with his eyes riveted on the printed pages. A pedant he certainly was, a stickler for the letter, incredibly so, especially when one considered the liberties he took when he played the same works. Once I called his attention modestly to this seeming paradox, and he answered, I love this, "When you are as old as I am now, you may do as I do, if you can." Once I played a Liszt Rhapsody pretty badly. After a few moments, he said, "The way you play this piece would be all right for Auntie or Mama." Then, rising and coming toward me, he would say, "Now let us see how we play such things." Some of these comments are definitely dated, but we read through it and see the good in it. Then I would begin all over again, but hardly had I played a few measures when he would interrupt and say, "Did you start? I thought I hadn't heard right." "Yes, master, I certainly did," I would reply. "Oh," he would say vaguely, "I didn't notice." "How do you mean?" I would ask. "I mean this," he would answer. "Before your fingers touch the keys, you must begin the piece mentally. That is, you must have settled in your mind the tempo, the manner of touch, and above all, the attack of the first notes before your actual playing begins." This is echoing what Constance Keene told me in lessons, and actually other teachers too, but really with Constance Keene, she would tell her students to actually, when you're practicing, trying to memorize your program for a recital, to visualize yourself playing the whole program in a chair away from the piano with your eyes closed. And she even used to say, with your eyes closed, imagine the countdown from 10, 9, 8, all the way down to 0, and then boom, you imagine yourself playing. And it was the same thing at the piano before putting your hands there. You gotta do some serious, quick processing to get in the character of that piece. Every piece is so different. It's like a different costume that we have to put on. We play a Beethoven this, a Bach that, a Ligeti this, a Gershwin that, something else, who knows, then we improvise. Everything needs its own character, and it takes time to get there and to imagine the touch and the tone and everything just so precisely in the tempo. So when I read that, I was like, this is Miss Keene, and this is the legacy of Abram Chasins coming through Josef Hofmann, and that I really love. I live alone, and so don't have a whole lot of friends. So in a way, when I come across these connections in history, it makes me feel I have friends in the past. So preparing yourself before your hand hits the keys. And by the by, what is the character of this piece? Is it dramatic, tragic, lyric, romantic, humorous, heroic, sublime, mystic? What? Well, why don't you speak? He says to Hofmann. And generally, I would mutter something after such a tirade, but usually I said something stupid because of the awe with which he inspired me. Finally, after trying several of his suggested designations, I would hit it right. Then he would say, "Well, there we are at last. Humorous, is it? Very well. And rhapsodical irregular, eh? You understand the meaning?" I would answer, "Yes." "Very well, then," he would reply. "Now, prove it." And then I would begin all over again. It's so like Miss Keene. Oh, gosh, I just love it. I love it. And I try to do this in my own teaching. I try to get students to think about, we do it together sometimes, come up with adjectives that we might use to describe the piece, the mood, not to literally describe a scene, here's where the horses come running and here's where the whatever. No, but a character, like, is this a mysterious, ominous, brooding, kind of moody, peculiar kind of mode, or is this just upright joyfulness, playful energy, that kind of thing? And that is part of it, the preparation being the it, before you put your hand down, as well as thinking of the tempo and all that. But you got to have the character too. So I just love this conversation here. And then now prove it. You think the piece is about something joyful and upright? Now prove it. Play it so that I can hear as the listener what this joyful, upright piece sounds like. And this particular part really made me happy. And the last part here, and then I would begin all over again. Okay, so he would stand at my side, and whenever he wanted a special stress laid upon a certain note, his powerful fingers would press upon my left shoulder with such force that I would stab the keys till the piano fairly screamed for me. When this did not have the effect he was after, he would simply press his whole hand upon mine, flattening it out and spreading it like butter all over the keys, black and white ones, creating a frightful cacophony. Then he would say, almost with anger, "But cleaner, cleaner, cleaner," as if the discord had been of my doing. Such occurrences did not lack a humorous side, but their turn into the tragical always hung by a hair. I love that. That gives me goosebumps. That willingness to go anywhere in the lesson, to go anywhere at your piano, any mood, be willing to go there, right? To be laughing one moment and then to the tragic the next. And this hung by a hair, especially if I had tried to explain or to make excuses. So I generally kept silent, and I found after some experience that was the only proper thing for me to do. For just as quickly as he would flare up, he would also calm down again. And when the piece was ended, I would hear his usual comment, "You are an excellent young man," and how quickly was all pain then forgotten. I remember on one occasion that I played Schubert Liszt's Erlkönig, When I came to the place in the composition where the Erl King says to the child, "Thou dear sweet child, oh come with me," and I had played several false notes besides very poor arpeggios, Rubinstein asked me, "Do you know the text at this place?" As a reply, I quoted the words. "Very well then," he said. "The Erl King addresses the child. Erl King is a spirit, a ghost. So play this piece in a spirit-like way, ghostly, if you will, but not ghastly with false notes." I had to laugh at his wordplay, and Rubinstein himself chimed in, and the piece was saved, or rather the player. For when I repeated that particular part, it went very well, and he allowed me to continue without further interruption. Once I asked him for the fingering of a rather complex passage. "Play it with your nose," he replied, "but make it sound well." I can hear Miss Keene saying something almost identical to that in her very low, raspy Brooklyn accent. I can hear it. "Play it with your nose, kid, but make it sound musical." This remark puzzled me, and there I sat and wondered what he meant. As I understand it now, he meant, help yourself. The Lord helps those who help themselves. As I said before, Rubinstein never played for me the works I had to study. He explained, analyzed, elucidated everything that he wanted me to know, but this done, he left me to my own judgment, for only then, he would explain, would my achievement be my own and incontestable property. I learned from Rubinstein in this way the valuable truth that the conception of tone pictures obtained through the playing of another gives us only transient impressions. They come and go, while the self-created conception will last and remain our own. Now, when I look back upon my study days with Rubinstein, I can see that he did not so much instruct me as that I learned from him. He was not a pedagogue in the usual meaning of that word. He indicated to me an altitude offering a fine view, but how I was to get up there was my affair. He did not bother about it. What does that do? It makes you got to do it yourself, and which is another thing about YouTube that in a way, I love YouTube, but it does kind of weird me out that there's so much content, right? And like how to learn how to play, how to do this, like, we're being spoon-fed so many different approaches, and like, I just wonder if people have enough time left after watching everything to work it out for themselves at the piano. You know? That's an important part of it. Yeah, he did not bother about showing me how to get up that mountain. Play it with your nose. Yes, but when I bumped it till it fairly bled, where would I get the figurative handkerchief? In my imagination. And he was right. Isn't that great? And at page 2 there, they put this picture. I can't make out the text. It's too small. But I presume a painting of Rubinstein teaching Josef Hofmann. And then on the front of the article, too, there's a picture of Rubinstein that was autographed for Hofmann. To be sure, this method would not work with all pupils. You know, here's the view from the mountain, now you go figure it out. You know, that method of Rubinstein's would not work with all pupils. But it is nevertheless well calculated to develop a student's original thought and bring out whatever acumen he may possess. He or she, of course. I'm reading into this. If such a one succeeded by his own study and mental force to reach the desired point which the great magician's wizardry had made him see, he had gained the reliance in his own strength. He felt sure that he would always find that point again even though he should lose his way once or twice, as everyone with an honest aspiration is liable to do. If you don't know how to finger something or how to pedal, it's okay if you can't find the answer immediately on Google. It's okay. Work it out. Climb that mountain kind of thing. I recall that Rubinstein once said to me, "Do you know why piano playing is so difficult? Because it is prone to be either affected or else afflicted with mannerisms. And when these two pitfalls are luckily avoided, then it is liable to be dry. The truth lies between those three mischiefs." Somewhere in the middle, right? How do you find that? That's the psychic side of the piano playing, which, as I said earlier, depends on our own unique individual experiences, the things that you have been through in your life that no one else has, in the order that you went through them. Everything, your memories, your experiences, your hardships, your highs and lows, the people you've known, the things you love and food you like, and places you've been, it's all in you and it comes out at the instrument. When it was settled that I should make my Hamburg debut under his baton with his own D minor concerto, I thought the time had come at last to study with him one of his own works. So I proposed it, but Rubinstein disposed of it. I still see him, as if it were yesterday, seated in the green room of the Berlin Philharmonic during an intermission in his concert. It was on a Saturday, and telling me, "We shall appear together in Hamburg on Monday." The time was short, but I knew the concerto and hoped to go through it with him sometime in the remaining 2 days. I asked him permission to play the concerto for him, but he declined my urgent request, saying, "It is not necessary. We understand each other." Imagine that, eh? And even in this critical moment, he left me to my own resources. And honestly, the thought of that makes me shudder with fear, I want the rehearsals. I want as many as I can get, right? But it's just, it worked for them. It worked for him. After he left me to my own resources. After the last and only rehearsal, the great master embraced me before the whole orchestra, and I was not in the 7th, but in the 8th heaven. Everything was all right, I said to myself, for Rubinstein was satisfied. The public simply had to be. The concert went off splendidly. After that memorable debut in Hamburg, which was on the 14th of March, 1894, I went directly to see Rubinstein, little dreaming that my eyes would then see him for the last time. I brought with me a large photograph of himself, and though fully aware of his unconquerable aversion to autographing, my desire for the possession of his signature overruled my reluctance, and I made my request. He raised both fists and thundered, half angry and half laughing, "Es-tu brute? Are you a brute?" But my wish was granted, and I reproduced the portrait in this article. And that's the picture on the front here, autographed to Hofmann. Then I asked him when I should play for him again, and to my consternation he answered, "Never." In despair I asked him, "Why not?" He, generous soul that he was, then said to me, "My dear boy, I have told you all I know about legitimate piano playing and music making." And then changing his tone somewhat, he added, "And if you don't know it yet, why, go to the devil." I saw only too well that while he smiled as he said it, he meant it seriously, and I left him. I never saw Rubinstein again. Soon after that, he returned to his villa in Peterhof, near St. Petersburg, and there he died on November 19th, 1894. The effect that his death had upon me, I shall never forget. And when I read this coming part, it made me cry. I probably won't cry now because I know it's coming, But I did the same thing when Miss Keene died, and I remember it was over Christmas break, and I was already at home from school, and her husband called me Christmas Eve, and my parents, bless their heart, they helped me get a plane ticket back to New York City. We got permission from Manhattan School of Music so I could stay in the dorm. I was like the only student there, almost the only one, because they had closed it for winter break, and went to the service for Miss Keene that they had, and it was a very emotional experience. I can remember it very clearly. When you lose a teacher you're very close to, it's really hard. The world appeared suddenly entirely empty to me, devoid of any interest. My grief made me realize how my heart had worshipped not only the artist in him, but also the man. How I loved him as if he were my father. I learned of his death through the English papers while I was en route from London to Cheltenham, where I was booked for a recital on the 20th. The B-flat minor sonata by Chopin happened to be on the program, and as I struck the first notes of the funeral march, the whole audience rose from their seats, as if by command, and remained standing with bowed heads during the whole piece in honor of the great departed. A singular coincidence occurred at my concert on the preceding day, the day of Rubinstein's death. On this day I played for the first time in public after my 7 years' retirement, excepting my Hamburg debut. It was in London. In this concert I played, as a novelty, a Polonaise in E-flat minor, which Rubinstein had but recently written in Dresden and dedicated to me. He had included it in the set called Souvenir de Dresde. This piece has throughout the character of a funeral march in all but the time division. Little did I dream while I was playing it that day that I was singing him into his eternal rest, for it was but a few hours later that, in the far east of Europe, my great master passed away suddenly of heart failure. 2 years later, I played this same Polonaise for the second and last time. It was on the anniversary of his death in St. Petersburg, where, in honor of his memory, I gave a recital, the proceeds of which I devoted to the Rubinstein Fund. Since then, I have played this piece only once, at home and to myself, excluding it entirely from my public repertoire. For though it was dedicated to me, the time and circumstances of its initial performance always made me feel as if it still belonged to my master, or at best, as if it were something personal and private between us two. Thanks so much for watching. I'll be back with more content devoted to performing and exploring the music of J.S. Bach with some additional meanderings into some of these writings from great pianists of the past. Take care, stay well, stay safe, happy practicing, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.